Okay, so Soul Mask is a game about my great-grandfather and how he and his family fought jaguars and other tribes while on a journey of discovery. That's of course not true. He did it alone. But since neither of us are that cool, I'm going to share the best starter tips I can to help you have the best start on your journey of survival and domination in the tribal survival sandbox MMO Soul Mask. In character creation, you have the option of choosing your starting mask. I've heard that you can find more through gameplay, so your choice right now, is simply how you want to work through the early levels. You have your choice of Civilization, which sounds like a tanky healer, Conquest is your melee fighter, and Rich is your archer. Bows are iffy at the start, but you absolutely need to focus on poison making to help the damage you deal. I'll go into detail on that in my combat build video later on. Once you're done creating your character, it throws you out into the game, and in order to understand the basics of the game, focus on doing the tutorial tasks. You're going to get a lot of XP that's going to get you into the next levels, as well as understanding some of the nuances of the game. As you're working through that, here's the good stuff. When any piece of gear is crafted, it has a chance of being higher quality. Gray, green, blue, purple, yellow, and red. Your goal is of course to grind out gear until you have a full set of legendary gear, but if you do the same for your minions, your armor and weaponsmiths will all level up, increasing the quality of the things they make also. So even if you have a full set and you don't need to worry about making any more gear, build kits for your minions also. Your crafters will level up, and if the other minions are ever attacked, they'll have a decent chance at defending themselves, and in the case of your combat minions, they'll become more effective in combat and when you control them. You won't have to worry about them being undergeared. And when you're eventually eaten by a jaguar or an anaconda, or lose your gear to a bug like I did, you're going to have a full box of legendary gear that you can put on and get back to whatever it was that you were doing. If you want to use the bow, you're going to want to pay attention to this one. Unlike many other games where a bow will automatically use arrows in your inventory or allow you to select different varieties of ammunition with a wheel, Soul Mask has you take your arrows and drag them to your bow. I didn't learn this through the game tutorials, but maybe I missed it, but I had to search Discord for the answer. Hopefully, this is changed or made more obvious in the future because swapping between normal and poisoned arrows is going to become cumbersome in the future. Since we're talking about weapons, if you have a spare weapon in your inventory, when the one you're using breaks, it's going to automatically be replaced. You just have to pull it out again, but that's a tiny inconvenience when you're in the middle of a fight anyway. This is a highly useful function, and I suggest that you keep extras of your most used weapons when you're planning a long combat session. I'm pretty sure this system works for armor also, but if that happens and the system puts some garbage rags on you, it might be time to head back to the base and fix everything up rather than pushing your luck. While in combat, make sure that you're locking onto your target. It'll help you get your hits in as well as let you block and dodge when you need to. Bows will disengage the lock while aiming, but your active skill can be used while you're locked on to help those arrows hit. There are 3 level systems that you want to pay attention to. First is your awareness level, which is basically your main level, which gives you your attribute points to distribute. You get a little gold sparkle when you level up, so when you see that, be sure to spend your new points to help you out. Don't be like me and forget to allocate points and try to fight bosses. It doesn't end well. The second is your skill levels. These are tied to your weapons and crafting skills. As you level up, you can unlock new active skills that you can swap between freely. For double blades, the 2 I could use were a flurry attack or a dodge and attack ability. But you can also unlock perk levels where you can choose a bonus to apply to your weapons and skills. Things like more damage or better stamina efficiency for weapons and faster crafting time or a higher quantity of crafts for crafting. Now here's the thing. Since you can control your minions and use their skills and abilities, you can also allocate their stat points and bonuses. This will be pretty important to help them defend against attacks, and to be actually helpful when they're tagging along with you on an adventure. The easiest way to do this is to go to your character menu and swap between all of your peeps. The third level system is for your mask. As you do new things, recipes will tell you how much mask XP you get, so make sure you're doing new activities and crafting new things a few times to gain that XP before you set your minions on those tasks. Doing some of the mundane things yourself is also a way to gain that mask XP. While you're out adventuring at the ancient ruin sites, you're going to gather these green gems. One will replenish the mask energy and the other is used to activate abilities in the mask. The most important one for me was the life scanner, but there's also an aggro indicator that lets you know if something spotted you and is out to hurt you. Jaguars are quiet and fast, so you don't have a lot of time once you get the alert, but depending on your setup, you should be able to defend yourself. Unless you panic. You also get a mineral scanner, which will highlight nodes like tin and copper. The mask gives you bonuses to leveling various skills, and they'll probably be more useful once the level cap is removed. There are two things I wasn't able to do in the test though. Use the mimicry ability and obtain new masks. There's a decor table that lets you decorate your mask and put on body paint as long as you have the materials. But unlocking new masks wasn't made clear enough for me to know what to do right now. I've heard that there are dungeons and tough summoned bosses, so maybe that's where these masks can be unlocked. When I find out, I'll let you know. You can respec your character. At level 40, I needed to unlock the next stage of recipes, but I had no more points to spend. They were all spent on old recipes that were no longer relevant, like thatch building pieces and stone weapons. Up at the top is a respec button, and it'll refund all of the points you've spent so far so you can respend them on more relevant recipes for the next stage of your adventure. Although now that I'm thinking about it, I wonder if this design was intended for specialization within a clan, where players can spec into a specific crafting tree and be the main crafting dude for the clan. I didn't have a clan set up or join one in the test, so I have no idea. Either way, respecking recipes is easy when you need to do so. You can also respec your attribute points if you want, but that requires a potion that can only be made at level 25 at a brewing table. It's called the Mysterious Tisane and will also sometimes drop from the first tribe leader. I haven't used the potion, but if it works like every other game with this function, you're going to get your attribute points back and then you can just redistribute them however you like. Bows are questionable right now, so if you spec'd into it and you changed your mind later on, you can respec and try a new weapon build instead. Personally, I think I'm going to lean into agility more and use both dual blades and gauntlets, and I'll explain why in a different video. You can place a total of 6 bonfires on the map at a single time. So you can have 6 different bases, or you can have a bunch of extra respawn points when you go exploring. This is definitely a good idea since jaguars will ruin your day very quickly. If you plan on returning to any given spot in the future, make sure to build around the bonfire and throw some fuel in it to keep it going. But if it's just a spawn point, make sure you break it down when you're done in the area so you can build another one when you need to. On the topic of dying, every time you die, your chosen active ability resets to its default. Make sure that you change it back to what you want or what you're used to, otherwise you'll be using the wrong ability at the worst possible time. Hopefully, this changes in the future. Now, apparently teleporting exists in the game, but I haven't unlocked those things yet. What I understand is that you can use the big portals to teleport items from one big portal to the next, like you carry them in your bags. But personal teleporters require that your bags are empty in order to teleport. This sounds similar to Valheim, where you can't take metal items through, or time travel in the Terminator. In order to encourage travel and adventure through the dangerous jungle to travel to new areas. Moving bases is a pain, but I'm sure there's an efficient method to be found later on. I just haven't found it yet. So let's talk about bases some more. Regardless of where you decide to build, if you care about how efficient your tribe is, organization is going to be really important. Make sure that when you're building, you're giving yourself a lot of extra space and build your main base up 2 or maybe 3 floors to help open up the space that will let your minions have enough space to get around each other without getting stuck on chairs, doors, each other, or whatever. They travel in really straight lines and take really weird paths, so their paths need to be adjusted, and hopefully that gets tweaked later on. The other reason you want to make sure that you have a lot of space is because upgrading the workbenches makes them bigger. So it's safe to say that any workbench or structure that can be upgraded is also going to get bigger, which means you'll need the space to fit everything in. Not to mention having a storage space for the hundreds of boxes you're going to wind up with. I'm still trying to figure out the most ideal storage system and base layout, but the automation is a little wonky, so it's tricky. When I figure it out, or when I find something that works for me, I'll share it with you. Once you can make farmland, you can start farming. When I got to this point, I thought I could only farm with a minion, and I could only assign one when I unlocked the granary. It didn't make sense, and I was, just being all upset, but of course that's because I'm an idiot. This is like Valheim, where if you have the seeds in your toolbar, you can just use them and plant things manually. You're going to need compost to fuel the plants, so to speak, and plants won't grow if the farm has weeds on it. Herbicide will take care of that, but you either need to find that on the chiefs or make it with later crafting recipes. When you get the granary, your dude will plant things more efficiently than you ever could. So you really only need 1 farmland for any particular item, and you'll be swimming in chili and tomatoes. Another point here is that you probably want to find a minion that's both good in planting and harvesting, since the person in charge of planting the farm is also going to be harvesting it, and you'll want that to be as efficient as possible. I did watch him, and even though he had a scythe, he didn't use it, so I don't know what the deal is with that. I'm sure it's fine. Farming kind of goes hand in hand with monkeys. If you want a healthy supply of fruits and other things you can't get while farming, having a few monkeys gathering those for you will add up pretty quickly, as long as they don't bug out and quit gathering. I'm not exactly sure how they work and what exactly they do. The menu is kind of weird and it lists a lot of things that don't make sense, but I'm sure I'll figure that out later on. Let's move away from our base and into base raiding. When you attack an NPC base, if you let them raise the alarm, things are going to get much harder for you. If you're in a group, it might not be a big deal, but if you're solo like I am most of the time, it's a big problem and can end a raid immediately. These guys running back and forth will trigger the smoke alarm if they see you. Take them out and then destroy the stone structure to prevent anyone from warning the rest of the tribe. If you don't, everything will be easily aggroed, and support troops will arrive with the sole mission of hunting down anything and anyone nearby. If you come up to a fort and the alarm is going, you can either fight through it and take everything out, or come back later. If you're on a PvE server, your best hope is that players have learned to take out those alarms if everyone is going to have an easier time farming the bosses. In that first base, you can find your first mount, the alpaca. If you can raid the base and get far enough, you definitely want to pick one up before you do anything else. Maybe 2, because now that I'm thinking about it, you might be able to breed them to make more mounts in case you lose the one you have. I'll have to check that out later on. I had a jaguar mount, and the first time I took it out for a spin, I was killed by an anaconda, and then the mount vanished. So I was a little upset considering the effort it takes to get one of those. If they can be bred, you might only need to capture 2 jaguars in order to keep the mounts flowing, something I'll have to test later on in the future for sure. Back to the alpaca though. Once you have this, it'll be much easier to travel to the second camp to farm copper to prepare for the next stage in your adventure. If you can get the alpaca, you are geared enough to get copper. I didn't know this, and I wasted a lot of time thinking I was still not ready to go to the next camp. When you are mining, be sure to have the alpaca follow you and then just stuff it full of ore so you can bring home as much as possible. 2 or 3 trips should be enough to grind out buildings and legendary gear. You'll want to do the same thing with tin so you can make bronze and do all of that stuff. As a bonus tip, considering the amount of time that it takes for ingots to be made, you might want to make 3 furnaces, in the case of bronze, in order to have one dedicated to copper, one dedicated to tin, and then the third one dedicated to bronze, in order to have your production line as efficient as possible. The second thing about these bases is that each tribe's gear has specific properties. The first tribe you run into has a weakness to piercing damage and a resistance to slashing damage. The second tribe resists pierce, I think, and has a weakness to blunt damage. When you're attacking these bases and those bases in the future, you're going to want to bring minions or control minions that have skills that are going to make the raid easier for you. I never did this because I'm an idiot and am only thinking about it now, but that leads us to our next topic. When you first start, you can recruit outcasts to start farming and crafting stuff for you. They're good enough to get going, but when you're geared enough to get into the first tribe, you'll want to find crafting barbarians. These guys are the ones attacking you with tools instead of weapons. Axes, pickaxes, scythes, and butcher knives. Any NPC attacking you with one of those and is wearing more colorful gear will be a crafter that you should recruit and take back to your base if you have room. Ideally, you'll want minions with 120 in 1 or 2 crafting skills, multiple with a high killing ability, and combat minions that will cover each damage type. This way you can control them to take on specific enemies and challenges. Spears or bows for piercing, hammers or gauntlets for blunt, and swords or dual swords for slashing. The reason you want these crafting NPCs is because they're going to level up in crafting skills that will make various crafting tasks easier, quicker, and more efficient. This is especially true for weapon, tool, and armor smiths. The higher skill they are, the easier it is for them to crank out legendary gear. For now, I think that's enough to get you going. This is all pretty early level stuff, mainly because I didn't get very far in the game itself once I started perfecting the automation of my base. I spent a lot more time organizing and programming than I did fighting and trying to get copper. I learned a lot, so once the game goes live, I think I'll have an easier time getting started, and hopefully, thanks to this little tips video, getting started will be much easier for you as well. I'm really excited to dive into this game for the next few weeks, so if you like what you've seen so far, make sure you sub to the channel so you don't miss what's next. But that's all I have for you today. You're welcome.